Erin Casey graduated from Cornell College in 2009 with degrees in English and secondary education. She attended the Denver Publishing Institute in 2009 and has been a recruiter ever since. She is the Communications and Student Relationships Manager at the Iowa Writers House and one of two directors of the Writers' Rooms. She released her first book, The Purple Door District, in December of 2018. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really glad to be here today.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned in the introduction, you recently published your first book, The Purple Door District. Could you tell us a little bit about that book?
Sure. The Purple Door District is an urban fantasy about a young werebird named Bianca who is being chased by hunters, and her only chance to survive is if she finds the Purple Door District of Chicago, which is a safe haven for parahumans like herself. But the hunters are relentless and they come after her, so she ends up meeting werewolves, vampires, magi, and other avians who bring her into to protect her. They're all part of the community and their goal is to protect each other. So it's her story, but it's also the story of the community that saves her. So this is the first book in the series I'm writing. I actually just finished the first draft of the second book this last Sunday. So I'm excited for that. The book itself is actually just one component of a series my co-creator A.E. Keller and I are writing together. It's a series called Fates and Furies, set in the same world that we're hoping to release probably, I'm guessing, next year. Sorry, you probably just heard my bird.
Hello, birdie.
Speaking of birds, speaking of birds, actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to grab her real quick because she just went to the floor.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Nova. She's like, I'm gonna run under the furniture. It's totally fine, Mom. It's totally fine.
Aww.
This is Nova. Trying to get her in the camera focus. Say hi, baby girl.
Oh, there she is.
Anyway, as I was saying, the series that A.E. Keller and I are planning to put together is set in the same world. The Purple Door District is just a small component of it, and it was one that I fell in love with because of the community aspect. So she was completely fine with me writing the series. She checks for like the world building aspect because we've been putting this world together for years now. So she wanted to double check, make sure everything's okay, I didn't miss anything, and so it's been going really well. I've really enjoyed working on it, and definitely have my little feathered muses to keep me company.
It sounds like it. So you're working on the second one in the series. Do you have a title for that one?
Yes, it's called Wolf Pit. So the second book focuses more on the werewolf aspect, and there's a bunch of the werewolf characters that end up going missing. And the main character in that book is actually a fire magus, so she has magical firepower that she uses, but she has been adopted by the werewolf pack. And she goes on her adventure basically to try to rescue her family. Her father is one of the werewolves that's taken, one of her best friends is taken as well, and it's a much longer book because there's a lot of different aspects. You get separated between the two different worlds where you're stuck in the wolf pit and you're also with the main characters trying to figure out where did everybody go. So this book was a lot harder to write, I would say, because there were so many different POVs.
Oh, yeah.
But I also really, really enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. I'm hoping, this isn't solid, but I'm really hoping that the book will come out December 2019, so that 1 year from when the first one came out, that'll appear. But we'll have to see how the editing goes.
Right. Yeah, that's always kind of an unknown there. Especially if you want to be sure you want to get it right, you know.
It can kind of be the bane of existence for writers. I'm not sure which one's harder, writing the book or editing it, because I know I want to scream more when I'm editing the book.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I can tell you which one I enjoy more, and it's not editing. So I don't know. I've met a couple. I've met a couple writers who that's their favorite part of it. but most other people are normal. So, so.
What's normal with being a writer, though?
Good point. Good point. That's just, yeah, it doesn't really apply, does it? So,
No,
but having published your first book, what are some things that you've learned from that experience that you're taking forward into the second book and beyond?
Get more sleep. I think that's one thing, because I definitely did not sleep much while I was writing the first one, and that was not a good idea. Especially when you're up at midnight trying to edit and you're like, I don't know what word this is. Oh, the word is tree. Why am I having trouble figuring that out? Sleep more.
Yeah.
I think also take breaths, slow down, try not to edit everything at once. It's better, and like logically I know this and I can tell other people this, but sometimes we don't practice what we preach. But look for one element at a time as you're going through the book. Don't try to fix everything at once because it'll drive you crazy. Yeah. I already have my team of editors prepped and ready to help me out, so I did not have that last time, so I'm glad for that. Sorry, she's doing a happy dance on my shoulder right now.
So I'm going to move this over so we can see the bird. There she is.
There she is. She's just like, happy dance, Mom, happy dance. Like, leaning the right way. There we go. You good? You good? Yes, so just edit one element at a time and try not to freak yourself out with trying to do everything at once. Before, I had no idea who my editor was going to be. I didn't know who would be my proof. I have that team this time, so that's a lot less stress on my shoulders, which I really appreciate, because that's a lot of work to get through. Right. Also, marketing strategies are definitely going to change up just a little bit. Want to reach out to a wider audience, learning to reach out to people on like social media. And also, I'm actually going to be going to conventions this year with my book, with the first one, so I can start talking about the second one too. So that's nice.
Good plan.
You were just doing all the happy dance right now.
She thinks this is all about her.
Yep. She's like, well, it is about birds. So.
Right. So you've obviously invested a lot into these books and this genre. So what do you think makes this genre special and perhaps sets it apart from some of the other ones out there? I think
so. There's a discussion of like what's the differences between like urban fantasy and like the paranormal. And I would say I really like the urban fantasy because generally it's in can be in a contemporary time setting. It's in cities that I know. It's in so it's set in Chicago. I grew up near Chicago, so I'm familiar with some of the places. I've gone there with my dad, so for me that's easier than writing, say, a YA fantasy or medieval fantasy, which are both genres that I do write. In this case, I know the locations, I've been there, I know how to research them. It's a little bit easier in that regard. I think people enjoy urban fantasy more because it's easier to see themselves in that world. And you know, there's this kind of sense of it'd be so cool to have magic, or it'd be really cool to be transformed into a wolf or have these special abilities. And I think that becomes more apparent in the urban fantasy world. So I think that's what really draws people to it, to be honest. I know that's what drew me to it. Patricia Briggs, who writes the Mercy Thompson series, she's definitely one of the people that I admire with urban fantasy because she draws in all kinds of different elements. You can go into like pulling in from mystical fae settings and bring that into like a contemporary world and see how that changes. Some of the stuff that I really enjoy is like, how does magic play in some of the daily nuances? Like, there's a prompt out there where people talk about, I want to see a coffee shop run by fae, and like all the mechanical stuff is actually driven by fae magic. And how would that work? How does that change the setting? How does that make things different? So I think those type of elements are really interesting to me.
Yeah, that is. So you clearly have a lot, as I say, you put a lot of time and work into it, but you've also created a lot of characters. It sounds like you were just early on, you were listing a bunch of them. How do you go about creating your characters?
It depends. Sometimes they just kind of pop out and they're there and they're like, "Hi, I want to have a story." um, I'll tell you, you're going to fall off my shoulder, little girl. Come here, sweetie. Hi. All right. Go back over here. She's like, I can feel her sliding. I'm like, she's going to fall off. No, no, no. Or you can just stay on my hand. That's fine, too. I'll give you an example for one character. He appears briefly for a small part in the Purple Door District. I ended up writing a short story about him later. And completely developing him more, and I'm like, well, crap, now I really like him as a character. It's like, whoops. I'll talk about Wolf Pit a little bit.
Sure.
I had to actually create the entire wolf pack. So I sat down and I'm like, okay, I know who the alphas are. Now I need the betas. Now I need, are there younger members? Who would be doing this? Who would be doing that? And then just started listing names, and then slowly went through and started adding origins to them, where they come from, what they do, what they're like. And as I write them, then I get to know them. I start to realize, okay, this character has more of an attitude than this one. For the first Purple Door District, I knew right off I would need a leader for each of the groups. So the Avians have a leader named Carlos, who runs the Guacamole Grill. And then we have Gladys, who's a Magus, who's called the Violet Marshal, and she's the main lead of the Purple Door District in that area. I was like, I need a werewolf, so I have a character named Peta. And their type of specialties, so being a bird, being a wolf, being a Magus, kind of developed them into who they were. So Peta can be a bit gruffer, as werewolves tend to be. Gladys is a very motherly figure because she welcomes in all the people, and she's a water Magus and just has more of this element of healing about her. So I think that kind of makes her more of a motherly figure. And then you have, some of the less savory characters. So Trish gets introduced while charming werewolves, and you see the sultry side of the vampires and go into that element. So typically any character that gets named is going to have a purpose. I don't like doing red herrings, to be honest. And in the beginning, sometimes I really don't know what they're going to be like. It depends on how they interact with the character and what happens. If I'm really stuck with a character, sometimes I'll step away from the book and I'll actually just throw a couple into a scene and just see what they do and how they get along, and then it's like, oh, okay, well, now I know what that character's like and what they would do in that situation. So, and then to be honest, I'm like, I need a random character. I'm going to smack the keyboard and see what letters come up, and that's how I'm going to create it.
Right.
That's not to say everybody's like that.
Right,
Peta, for example, I did some history, did some research about his name. He's origin Native American. I went with a Native American name for him, as well as for Rosine. And some of the characters have really complex histories, so I wanted to give them a more detailed name, basically. So it really depends on the person and who screams the loudest in my ear when I'm writing. It also determines the POVs as well.
Yeah. I like that technique of putting two different characters into a scene together and just seeing what happens. I think that's a really good way to flesh out characters and learn about them, and stuff that you may not have come up with if you're just sitting down listing a bunch of traits. Which I think a lot of people do, but I think that's a good way to do it. Do you try to be more original with your writing, or deliver to readers what they want / expect?
I would say kind of a mix. So when I say werewolf vampire, you have an idea in your head. You think vampire, okay, undead, and werewolf is this or that. Okay, our werewolves are slightly the same as your typical werewolf, only ours have two different transformations. So they have the 4-footed werewolf, and they also have a biped form. are depending on their ages. Our vampires actually aren't dead. Their condition, they're born with it, or they can be infected with it. They do have the venom, but they have iron deficiency. They have a sensitivity to the sun. There are a lot of elements that make them vampiric, but they're not dead. And the way that they're able to change other people is their fangs. They actually have a venom sac behind a fang. So when they feed on someone, they can actually decide whether they want to inject them with the venom or not. Okay. That's why, like, they can go and they can feast on people and not turn every single, little lamb into another vampire. It also means they don't have to kill anybody to keep their secret. Not saying that some of the vampires don't leave body counts, but not all of them like to do that.
Right.
So some of it you expect, some of it you don't. That's kind of what A. Keller and I like to do, is we want you to feel familiar in a sense, but then get kind of lost into the world that we've created. So again, people know of magic users. You have expectations of that. Our magic users can draw from ether, which is earth magic, or aether, which is veil magic, which comes much later. So we like to do it that way. Otherwise, I feel like if you just throw a bunch of new stuff in at a person, it can be a little bit overwhelming and a little harder to relate to. Yeah. But it really depends. For a first-time book, I definitely want to make sure that I can relate to my readers more.
Yeah, because I know it seems like people are always saying, oh, we want something new, something different, but then you give them something totally new and different. They're like, oh, I don't like it. I don't take it away.
It's not like this thing that I read. It's not like that. Oh, dear. I will say that I do listen to my readers. So I read reviews. I talk to people when I go to events and people have ideas or opinions. I do listen to that because sometimes that can trigger an idea of, oh, maybe I could kind of do this or that, tweak it a little bit. That's why some people have said, hey, we want to know more about these two characters. On my Patreon page, I'm writing short stories about some of these characters, just so people get to know them, and also so they have a little bit of something to keep their attention until the next book comes out.
Right. No, that's good. Do you ever project any of your own habits or whims on your characters? Or do you try to stay away from that altogether?
I would say any character that has signs of anxiety and depression, that would be me. Yeah. To be honest.
Well, you're a writer. That's rife in the writing community, so you're not alone there.
Kind of walk hand in hand. Yeah.
So.
I would say typically I don't intentionally push my own traits onto characters. It's easy about like anxiety because I do deal with that. I will say in the third book I am planning to introduce an obese character, that because you don't see a lot of large characters in books, I feel. Most of them are smaller, or weight isn't as talked about, I would say. And that's something that I can relate to, so I would like to put a character in like that. So that's probably the closest to intentionally putting a character in that has some of my traits.
Right.
But otherwise, I just try to keep them unique and let them do what they need to do.
Yeah, I think that's also a good strategy. Really good. What was your hardest scene to write, or perhaps your hardest type of scene to write?
Oh, goodness. Not to give anything away, there is a death scene in the first book, and that one was definitely really hard for me to write. I wrote it quickly, probably because I wanted to get over with it. Yeah. But it was hard because I had to say goodbye to a character that I really adored. So that's definitely difficult. I would say the other hard part, and this is true with, I would say, Wolf Pit and most other things, is writing the villain characters and writing their reasonings for doing what they do. Because I like characters, villains, I guess you can say, that they have a reason for doing the terrible things that they do because they believe in something. there's a purpose behind it. It's not just, I'm going to be evil.
Right.
There's a reason.
Right.
And sometimes when I'm still working on constructing that villain, I'm like, okay, so explain to me why you're a jerk. What is the point behind what you're doing? Why are you messing with all of my characters' lives? And one thing that I sometimes do with my characters is I do an interview with them. So I just take a blank piece of paper and I start asking them questions and see what the responses are. Just stream of consciousness, see what ideas pop out. And you would not believe how much a character will come out when you do that. So I need to do that with my villains more, but I think in the first Purple Door District, getting that villain in place was hard. Because there were a couple of different ones. Two that you become familiar with, and one that kind of pops up, and you're like, wait, who is this person now? It's like, well, he's a true baddie. So those are probably the two hardest ones, the death and the villains. And yes, I do have body counts in my books. I'm sorry, guys. Not every story has a happy ending.
Right. So, over the years, what would you say has improved the most about your writing?
I'm not as wordy as I used to be. That being said, I guess I took a break from a main series I was writing to write one book, what I thought was one book, of medieval fantasy. That turned into 3 books. The first book, first draft, was 250,000 words.
Wow.
I had to learn to cut down. Yeah. I do still want to publish that book one day, just not right at this moment because I have Purple Door District and I really wanted to learn a bit more about myself as an author and about my writing style. One of the things I noticed is that when you're working on a project over a long period of time, sometimes my writing style ends up shifting a little bit. It might depend on other books that I'm reading at that time, so you learn from other authors' styles. It might be because of the mood I'm in, I'm feeling more creative or less creative. I feel like my style is becoming more consistent now, and I'm really learning about myself as an author, and I like not writing quite as much. Because I can actually complete things at a decent time. I'm also not drowning my readers, which I know that's been a problem in the past. So I'm working on that, and I'm sure my editors are like, yay, that I'm doing this. So I may still be wordy as I talk with people, but the writing is a bit more streamlined now. So.
Awesome. As it sounds, you've really begun finding your author's voice, your writing voice, and at least in my own experience, I feel like once you start doing that, I wouldn't say it becomes easier to write, but as you mentioned, it does become more consistent, and things they come together a little bit more. You find your identity, I suppose. So that's awesome.
I think you become a bit more comfortable with it.
Yes.
And I think.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, sorry.
I was going to say, I was talking with somebody else too, and one of the things that I don't remember who the author was, but one of the things that characterized this author's work was, we both agreed, her confidence. Like, you could sense that confidence in her writing, and it was very attractive. It made you want to read it, because sometimes you read books, but some people, and you can tell that they're being cautious, they're not really sure. It's kind of like watching any sort of performer who's not sure of their craft. It kind of makes you uncomfortable, like, they're going to mess up, or the guys are going to fall, or this person's going to mess up on their instrument, whatever. You know what I mean? It's like, if the performer, in this case the writer, is comfortable, it makes the consumer, in this case the reader, also comfortable. And I think that happens when you find your voice and you become comfortable with yourself, that you make other people comfortable to join you on that journey as well. So that's
I completely agree. I think I went through a period there where I was trying to please too many people. I was getting a lot of questions of change your writing style like this, or maybe write like that. don't put in as much detail. Oh wait, put in more detail. So it was really daunting and confusing, and it took a while to be like, okay, happy medium is okay, and then finding my feet there. So yeah.
Awesome. That is fantastic. Well, Erin Casey, thanks so much for joining us. Where can we find you online?
Few places. So you can find me at Amazon at amazon.com/author/Erin Casey author. You'll be able to find both the Purple Door District ebook and paper book there, as well as some anthologies I'm in. My main website is erincasey.org, where you can also buy a signed copy of my book there if you'd like. I also host author interviews there every Friday, and I put up a blog post every Tuesday. So it's an active website. You can find me on Instagram at Erin Casey 09, or sorry, Instagram Erin Casey author, Twitter Erin Casey 09, and most of the social media stuff is on my website. So I'm all over the place.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's great. So people, go get Purple Door District, available now. Do it.
Yes. Yes.
Erin Casey, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks so much. You have a great day.
You too.